Now we're back with our regularly scheduled programming with a game that has gone through the ringer with Steam and Epic Games Launcher. Horses started off being banned from Steam because of a non-sexual scene that involved a minor and a naked adult. Then the studio removed that scene, blurred out all the nudity in the game, and Steam has kept it banned for whatever reason that they've decided. I don't really know why. Epic Games Launcher also had it set to release on their platform and banned it the day before it released. The only major digital market that you can buy it from is GOG. You kind of expect that this is going to play out like one of those old Newgrounds games you'd find back in the 2000s, like Torture, or some heinously offensive stuff like the Postal series. And to be honest, it's not really like either one of those. Horses is exactly what you would expect, with some really gross scenes, some weird sexual moments, and lots of extremely triggering stuff in its storyline, but its presentation is not at all what you would expect from a game that's been banned on multiple platforms. It's really kind of on the tamer side of things, with no nudity being in the entire game, and not really any gore being there outside of one or two scenes. It's exactly what you would expect, but it's packaged in a way that subverts your expectations. The packaging of it focuses more on making a creative experience rather than using its grotesque content for the sake of shock value. Once I was finished with it, it immediately popped into my head like it was one of those old films like 120 Days of Salo, or Climax by Gaspar Noé, or even Lars von Trier's Antichrist. These films that inarguably push the boundaries of graphic content, but they do so in the name of a theme. Horses does the same idea, and it feels like the closest you're going to get to playing an A24 film, but in video game form. I don't want to reveal a lot about the plot because the less you know, the better, but all I'm going to say is that you play as a farmer boy who's going to work for 2 weeks on a ranch during the summer, and the storyline just gets progressively more unhinged with an evil farmer that you're working for. The concept alone subverts your expectations, and I think if the concept of horses doesn't hook you immediately, then you probably won't be in the mood to play the rest of it. It's nothing that interesting gameplay-wise. There's really barely any gameplay to begin with. You pretty much just walk around, click and point. I mean, everything that's the driving force to play is the narrative and the presentation for how good this game's gonna be. It makes total sense that Horses was inspired more off of films rather than video games. You see that in the art style decisions. The creators will cut to live action footage to show off an action that you're doing in the game, or they'll do a close-up on a human body part with a camera, and it's meant to show you how vulnerable and uncomfortable our meaty husks of bodies are when you're up close and personal to them. A person from far away looks beautiful, but when I'm drinking a glass of water and then there's a live action shot that just shows off a person's Adam's apple while they're swallowing a drink, it just feels so exposing rather than refreshing. It gives off that very uncomfortable feeling. This goes a step farther with the main antagonist when he's yelling at you and making demands, and it gets really up close to his face. It feels less like he's asking you to do something and more like he's demanding it just due to this shot. It's intimidating. But in the end of the day, these live action shots remind us whether you are an oppressed figure in this story, or you're the oppressor piece of shit farmer, or even if you're the main character, we all embody the same vulnerable human flesh, and therefore we are all equals in the eyes of nature or God, whatever you believe out there. Horses shows off its film inspirations again by being a literal silent film. It has the black and white aesthetic, and it even goes as far as to show you text cards for everything people say throughout the game. The one thing that is not silent is the music and the occasional sound effect like eating, ringing a doorbell, opening a gate, or hearing the neigh of a horse come out of someone's mouth. The sound effects, being the only things that make noise outside of the music, give this uncanny tension. And I'm surprised that they managed to do all this without really exploiting it for just like an obnoxious jump scare. There's barely any jump scares in this entire game, if any. The sound effects are so effective too, because as the player, you're wondering, because you can hear them, can the main antagonist hear you? You'd never hear him yelling at you. You'd never hear him running towards you, but you hear this gate sound effect when you open it. It adds this build-up feeling that whenever you do something that makes a noise, it's like you've committed a crime. And that feeling of committing a crime only intensifies as you start to go against the antagonist later on in the story. You're always worried that he's going to notice you messing around with something due to the noises that you hear. Whether it's intentional or not, I have no idea if putting the sound effects, if that was the intention of putting the sound effects into the game. I just think it was a smart decision on the developers to go that route with the sounds of horses. If anybody's ever seen the movie 10 Cloverfield Lane, I think that the bad guy is similar to the enemy in that. He seems like a guy you could just chat with, like you would meet him in a restaurant and you could hear him talk about his farm, talk about his life, and he would be perceived as a normal individual. But internally, he's such an awful human being, and his entire belief system is based on entitlement. The entitlement of ownership over other people, demanding to be at the top of some made-up hierarchy of power that he himself has created in his own head. But you wouldn't guess that when you first met him. He just seems like a normal dude. They have a similar delusion in their head that comes out the more you get to know them. These three things, the visuals, the sound effects, the main villain, all of it exudes that uncomfortable feeling to the player, and I think that's the main goal of the game in terms of its fear factor. The themes of the game revolve around the idea of how far you are willing to let your uneasiness get the best of you. There's a theme of complacency here. Do you let evil people get away with evil actions because they deem it normal from their place of power? Or do you fight back against it, knowing that what they're doing is objectively evil? The theme of complacency I want to get into because it's kind of my jumping off point for what I think is wrong with horses, kind of the negatives. Decisions in video games sometimes matter, sometimes they don't. I play games like Mass Effect where every decision you do can come back to haunt you in a later game. I also love games like Persona though, where there's a handful of dialogue choices that you could pick any of them out of order and they're likely to not change anything about the actual game, outside of a few at the end. Horses wants to tell you a linear narrative-driven story that has a beginning, middle, and an end. But it also wants to let you be positive or negative or neutral to every question that's asked of you. If you're asked to do something evil, you can either be positive about it, negative towards it, or indifferent about it. But nothing you really say or do makes any difference in the game. The scene's going to play out very similarly or exactly the same no matter what you pick, with the exceptions of a few things. I think telling a linear story is fine. I don't want to just crap on it because it's linear. But the problem with horses is that the theme of complacency doesn't shine as much when there's nothing for you to fight against or be critical about until the game's linear narrative lets you. At the beginning of the game, I listened to roughly pretty much everything that the bad guy was telling me because I was worried he might turn on me. He might try to kill me. He might try to do something fucked up. And I thought, if I go against this guy, I'm going to be punished with my dissatisfaction in his evil deeds. But there's no real difference outside of some later on in the game. As far as I know, I've checked a lot of the decisions in the game. Maybe there's a couple, but as far as what I was seeing, it does not seem very different. Now, how would I have felt if I knew things would have gone differently if I pushed against him earlier in the story? I would understand the consequences of my complacency that I allowed to get the best of me in the beginning of the game, just out of my own fear of this man. That makes the theme of complacency shine so much brighter if you can see the consequences, the differences in your consequences if you went against it or even were less complacent to it. Maybe you would lose the game immediately, I don't know. Maybe you would stop him in the game earlier by being complacent. Maybe you need to be complacent to gain his trust. These complexities are needed when tackling a topic like this. And even if you want to say that the dialogue options don't need to make any difference in the story, you're just being too picky, the presentation is so deceitful and makes any complacent action feel like, oh, okay, well, I was just going to do that either way, so why does this matter? Who cares? And you really aren't wrong when you ask that question. What is complacency in a world where there's nothing you can push against to begin with? It's not complacency. It's just me doing what I'm told in the game. The presentation has this deceitful, you have choices with its dialogue choices, its positive and negative choices. Overall, it does have some boring sections, but most of my issues come from the problems in that presentation of the dialogue trees, countering the complacency theme. I was still pretty satisfied with the game in general. It's a very memorable experience, and it's not just the nastiness of the game that is going to be remembered. Some of it does feel a little bit unnecessary, particularly with 2 scenes standing out to me, but overall, I'd say a lot of the nasty parts here give you that feeling of powerlessness that's needed in this story about oppression. It's a very short, cheap game. It's worth $5 on GOG, and it has a runtime of about 3 to 4 hours. It's memorable for what it is, but also memorable for what it could have been. And as for anybody interested in playing this, go ahead and buy it. Like, this is a clean recommendation. I have issues with this, but go ahead and try it out, especially if this sounds like your type of thing, like a playable A24-esque film. If you're looking for anything riveting in the gameplay department, then yeah, don't play this. But if everything I've talked about sounds like something that would be interesting to you, like the uncomfortable elements, the silent film presentation, then honestly, go out and play it. It's not bad by any means. It's only $5, and you'd be supporting a small indie dev that pretty much got completely kicked off Steam and Epic Games Launcher. Horses has good intention with its graphic content, whereas half the games on Steam are hentai with harmful content that is solely made for gooner gamers. To me, Horses is not even remotely in that category and doesn't deserve to be treated less than other games on Steam that contain far worse. And I wish the developers the best of luck on making their money back. Comment down below what game you want me to review next, and if I pick your comment, I'll feature it in that video. You already know what we do on this channel, guys. We're going to be appreciating every single little piece of horror out there, and I'll always appreciate you. Once again, thank you for your patience. We're going to have 2 more horror reviews coming out over the next 2 days. Bear with me. They're all made. They're all scheduled. I've just been kind of sick, and you might be able to hear that in my voice still. I'll catch you next time.